I was Mr. Hypertargeting early in the game here, and seeing those results come in as poorly as they did puts you into a, oh my gosh, this is not a, let's tweak this model and make it work. We got to burn it down and start from scratch.
Hello, and welcome to the Marketing Architects, a research-first podcast dedicated to answering your toughest marketing questions. I'm Elena Jasper. I run the marketing team here at Marketing Architects, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Angela Voss, the CEO of Marketing Architects, and Rob DeMars, the Chief Product Architect of Misfits and Machines.
Howdy.
And we're joined by a returning guest, Dan Cleveland, our VP of Strategy at Marketing Architects.
Smarty Pants, Dan.
Welcome back, Dan.
Glad to be here.
We're back with our thoughts on some recent marketing news, always trying to root our opinions in data, research, and what drives business results. This week, we've asked Dan to join us to talk about a topic that tends to inspire a passionate response from marketers, and that is targeting. Should be lots of fun. But before we get into our interview with Dan, I want to share an article from Marketing Week by Chris Sutcliffe. He covers Mark Ritson's opening remarks at the Festival of Marketing late last year, and one topic of Ritson's was targeting. Ritson talked about the marketing industry's fixation with targeting that was especially prevalent in the 2000s. Today, there's more of a recognition that the more targeted a campaign, the more expensive it becomes to reach your audience effectively. But of course, this doesn't mean you should just target everyone. Byron Sharp actually coined sophisticated mass marketing, and he defines it as not targeting everyone or treating everyone the same, but understanding the similarities in your market and then catering for only the differences that matter in order to maximize reach while not eliminating the benefits of scale, which I think we'd probably agree with. But then Ritson brings up this challenge with sophisticated mass marketing. Most brands want to do this, but they just don't have the money for it, which means that the average brand has to slice the market much more than a massive brand can. Ritson references the work of Les Binet and Peter Field, who in the long or the short of it do talk about the Byron Sharp style of brand building, but they also balance that view with activation or more targeted performance marketing channels. Now, I know this challenge of wanting to reach a broad audience and build your brand, but these high costs making that prohibitive is something that we're familiar with, right, Ange?
Yes, I would say that we come up against that with marketers. And TV's not right for every brand, and it's not right for every brand at every stage. You know, it's great at reach. So it definitely has its role at the right time. But I do think that a common belief about building a brand is that it's a cost center for a business. And it's this mindset that I need to invest into a top of funnel channel like TV, but maybe not ever really get a sense of what that return might look like. And absolutely, TV's, not a channel that you can throw $1,000 at and get a read on performance like you can do in digital. So it feels like a big bet to brands. But when we think about like the understanding that TV too can drive immediate sales measurably, and if you think about it that way, it becomes more manageable in terms of that cost going into it. I'll never forget, we had a client that we have been working with for years now in the education space. And as we were in the prospecting phase and trying to bring them on as a client, we talked about how the goal was to drive both immediate sales and long-term awareness. And the CEO just lit up. This light kind of goes off in his head. And he's like, if I can make the immediate profitable, even at break even, all my branding is free. And so that's a much smaller jump, I think, for people to make. But I just don't know how much awareness of that is out there. I think there's too much of this kind of wait and see mentality that turns people off from TV. And there are big TV impacts that Dan is responsible for identifying that will take months. Not all of the impacts could be seen immediately. So I don't want to lead people down that path. But it's not the situation where we need to dump millions in and wait a year to know if it's working or not. There are a lot of leading indicators to whether or not there's anyone home pretty immediately.
I wanted to bring up this like long and short and ask you about like the brand versus performance debate, because I know it might not seem closely related to targeting, but I think it is, because typically people will say like, yeah, I would love to pursue high reach and not have to target so narrowly, but that would be a quote unquote brand campaign and I can only afford performance. So and like you just mentioned, we've seen clients realize that they can balance both. How have you seen them do that successfully?
There's better awareness now these days, I think, about brand building versus performance marketing. And I think those two mindsets are valuable because we understand that the consumer is at a different stage, right? They're in market or they're not in market, but it's kind of pulled apart strategy. And every channel, including TV, can and should be doing both to some degree, although some channels have a greater ability to do one better than the other. But when our clients are thinking about TV, they're thinking about their campaign executing both of those objectives at the same time. So creatively, we need to be thinking about the fact that our message is going to hit both in and out of market consumers. So what that means is that we need to be both helpful and practical to in-market consumers. And then also we need to be memorable for out-of-market consumers. I think there's a lot of focus right now on emotional storytelling, which we are big believers in, but not at the cost of practical conversions. And I think sometimes we can get in our own way of success by getting a bit too fanciful creatively. Just simple things like, if we're waiting until the last 2 seconds of the ad to tell the consumer who we are, that's probably not a great way to be memorable. We're storytelling the entire time, but we're not getting the full credit for the ad. A lot of folks are watching TV, quote unquote, watching, I'm throwing air quotes for anyone that's not watching YouTube, while doing other things. And so they're listening, but their eyes aren't on the screen. And so what that means is that if we only use music in this story-based scenario that's going on, but we don't have any VO or on-screen talent talking, it's likely that half of the people or more that could have heard your message didn't. Those are wasted dollars. Like, we talk about waste a lot related to targeting, like that's a waste. And then I think on the media side, TV is a channel with a lot of power in its ability to reach both people that are in market today and future customers. And we can't really segment who is where in that journey. And so when we think about media plans, we want to reach all those potential buyers. And of course, we need to do that cost effectively. I think that's where Mark jumps in. It's like, yeah, great idea, but like practically, how do you do that? Traditional means of buying are not likely to get you the cost that you need. That's why we built our AI platform back in 2018. We really believe that all or most impressions have value at the right cost. So it doesn't mean that there's no targeting at all. We need smart guys like Dan to help us do this in a sophisticated way, as Sharp mentioned, but it does require a bit of rewiring in terms of how marketers think about targeting in a space like digital versus television.
Yeah, it's funny how marketers sometimes want to go, like you're saying, so far to the brand or so far to the performance side when really there's more of a happy medium. Just to make this topic a little more confusing, I wanted to bring up a debate that I've seen on LinkedIn lately that's almost both an anti-brand and an anti-performance debate. So you think we couldn't do that as marketers, but we can. Marketers, I've seen them arguing that brand and performance aren't even relevant at all because every marketing channel is both a brand builder and performative in some way. None are totally all in on brand or all in on performance. So even having to separate brand and performance isn't right. How do we feel about that point of view?
I just think we like to argue as marketers. I mean, we get our undies in a bunch about the word performance and the word brand, right? I mean, they carry so much historical baggage. When you say the word performance, people think about old school, direct response, really selling the product, sell, really at the expense of branding, right? And on the other side of it, we think of branding as this self-indulgent, expensive exercise that has zero accountability. And I think the marketing community is actually in violent agreement that these are not the definitions of performance and branding that are desirable today. However, everyone's job in marketing is to drive a level of performance, or it's not advertising, right? And at the same time, the work should deliver on brand value, really the key word being value. I know the marketing community, including us, have spent so much time kind of trying to find those special words that don't offend anybody. You'll hear people throw out sales overnight, brand over time, or we'll say things like remarkable work that works remarkably. But, in fact, MA invests a ton of energy on both sides of the equation. I mean, we pre-test to make sure that our work is going to drive that immediate performance. We measure the heck out of it once it does enter the market, both in the immediate, but also in the long term. I mean, we've got our finger on the pulse of what's going to happen in 6 months with the brand. And are we exceeding benchmarks in terms of brand recall? So both of them are incredibly important. I think the marketing community may not like the words brand and performance, but we all sure love brand and performance. So we can argue about it if we want.
Yeah, I'd agree. The mindset of performative I think I would mostly agree with, just in that it does create accountability. Back to what I said before, like maybe not all channels, but I would say the vast majority of channels can do both in some capacity, not all of them equally on both sides of the teeter-totter, right? But I think what you're trying to guard against is going to top of funnel channels and going, well, this is a brand channel, so the accountability is only awareness. And that really is a shortcoming to what TV is actually capable of doing. And I think if you don't fully recognize what a top of funnel channel is capable of doing, you fail to recognize the scale potential of a channel that is so immensely powerful.
Well, let's move on to a different debate. I think we could probably remain in the brand and performance debate for the whole episode too. But let's talk about targeting. We're going to frame our conversation with the channel we know best, which is TV, because this targeting debate is especially nuanced when it comes to television, because linear TV is one of those channels that everyone looks at for reach, because you simply can't hyper-target linear TV. You have to embrace that positive spill. But connected TV or CTV or streaming really changed the TV targeting conversation for marketers, because all of a sudden you have this channel that's traditionally known for reach that now has targeting or performance capabilities. So when we started buying CTV, targeting became a big debate for us internally, because our clients were rightly excited about CTV targeting. This is supposed to help drive a clear return or performance from their TV campaigns, which is also what CTV had promised. But here's the kicker. Traditional CTV targeting approaches don't seem to deliver the performance they promised. Again, we're framing this conversation around CTV, but based on the research, this targeting conundrum is a reality for most other digital marketing channels as well. So that's why we've brought Dan on the podcast today. He's going to help us navigate the minefield that is this targeting debate and explain how we might approach it. So Dan, let's start at the beginning. Could you start by explaining the different types of targeting that are available to marketers?
Great. Thanks, Elena. So within the CTV space, marketers that are using or working, partnering with leading DSPs are going to have access to using their first-party behavioral data coming off of their own CRM systems. And traditionally, that's where most marketers kind of start thinking about, how do I get the most out of my existing customer base? Additionally, when they start looking into prospecting or non-customer sources, they almost always are turning first to third-party. And I'll admit a little context here. I grew up in a direct response environment and spent more years than I'll probably admit to here working with things like third party and doing hyper targeting. And during that era when database marketing was taking hold and becoming a bigger part of clients' budgets, third party targeting was really the primary, if not the only path to improving prospecting performance. So it's very natural for marketers, especially more experienced or tenured marketers, to have a reliance or a reflex to go to third-party sources. And what they're trying to do, and what I'll admit I've been really guilty of doing as well, is wanting to really mirror or match my core customer or my core target audience into this prospecting pool. So this targeting effort is really well-intentioned to try to find highest responding at the lowest cost opportunity. And that third-party piece is probably where this discussion is going to spend more time than not as we go forward. But then within CTV, the other pieces that come into it would be things like contextual targeting. So within the CTV space, advertisers have the ability to know what kind of programming that they are potentially going to be buying, and the interest in finding a match either with your product in a contextual category or just finding contextual categories that respond better than others would fit under what we would call contextual. One of the challenges real quick with contextual is that the space is still young enough, or possibly you could say mature enough, where the contextual standards are not real consistent. And we find that it really limits scale and limits precision. What one person calls a comedy may not really be a comedy, even though it shares the same label with the bidstream data sets. And then finally, lookalikes. And lookalikes is really a statistical method of being able to look at a certain audience and then find new and higher volumes of names at various levels or scale of volume within bigger data resources like data lakes. If you're talking to DSPs, many or most of them are going to have access to some kind of data lake that allows you to say, here's a pool of people. We want to find more people like them. lookaliking goes through a statistical process of understanding what traits really most effectively define and differentiate them, and then scores the data lake and allows you then to have this prioritized ranking for your use in your campaign. So I would say those are probably the 4 ways of thinking about targeting CTV today for marketers.
Dan, we like that you have a different background, different opinions. It wouldn't be a fun podcast if we all had the exact same experience with targeting. But I wanted to ask you, so that's a great overview of targeting in general. What about CTV? You talked about it a little bit, but I'd imagine that CTV targeting and what's popular would have to differ from digital, because CTV, it's more digital than linear, but one-to-one targeting still prevents some difficulties since TV is naturally a co-viewing experience, unlike scrolling in your Facebook feed.
I think part of what's different there is within CTV, like again, going back to what DSPs typically have done a really nice job of, is they've curated these relationships with data suppliers. And I would call it more traditional, where like within a digital platform, there may be things that are more native to the platform that you're using to target that they're able to make a little bit closer to the actual consumer or household that they're working with. DSPs in the CTV space typically have very large and very well built out and very expansive databases that are usually reflective of Gen Pop. And so as a CTV ad consumer, you're essentially buying things that are really representing households or IDs or IPs within the Gen Pop. And it's not necessarily platform designed. It's really more to get a sense for, in general, these are the characteristics of this part of the population.
So what about our personal experience? When we started buying CTV, what challenges did we encounter when we were using those more traditional, popular targeting methods?
Believe it or not, we've had some success and failures along the way, probably more failures than success starting out. And part of that was that we followed the typical kind of knee-jerk reaction of going to a hyper-targeting kind of approach, or at least trying to replicate our client's target audience within these data feeds and data sources. So we began with testing a couple different varieties of third-party and contextual. That was probably the 2 areas we spent most of our time early on trying to get a handle as to how those things would work. And what we found was that it was really difficult, especially in third party, to make the targeting pay off. And when I say that, you're starting out with a base cost of actually getting access to that IP or that name, if you want to think of it that way. But then the DSPs are going to charge you for every layer of targeting you add on to it. So you could say, I'm looking at an individual and I want to have attribute A and attribute B and attribute C. If I have all 3 of those attributes, I know I'm I'm dialed in. I'm looking at my target audience there. Challenge is that you're getting cost plus all along the way. And that usually became an inhibitor for us to really seeing performance pay out. And I would say that approach is something we spent a fair amount of time early on trying to refine and perfect. And in every instance, it led to us having tough conversations with clients and realizing that we were not able to really even recommend scaling at that time because we weren't seeing the performance that both client and us were hoping for.
So Dan, you just mentioned that we've had some ups and downs with targeting, but what about the ups? What kinds of targeting have we had success with?
Well, we found that the closer to first party data, typically the better. So some of the laws of nature play out here again for us. And we've also found that there really isn't a single golden solution, that we typically develop and test multiple methods, most with different approaches for maximizing proximity to first party data.
Speaking of some of these things that we've developed, this week we announced publicly a new targeting method that you spearheaded within the agency called smart targeting. Can you walk us through, as much as you can share, how does smart targeting work?
So smart targeting applies lookalike machine learning techniques against the CTV bid stream.
Okay, so for us that aren't as smart for the targeting, would you mind explaining that as if I'm in middle school?
Or in creative? Just kidding.
Shots fired.
Anyways, so yes, what we're doing, Rob, is we're using our clients' customer data to rank streaming content based on its efficiency or effectiveness to convert prospects. So you could call it something like midstream lookalike modeling, where we're trying to find the content that produces the best overall results. like a lot of, or almost any direct response efforts that we're in, it comes down to economics. And what this is allowing us to do is to really drive performance by both being able to deliver our low CPM opportunities to clients, but also having the higher response rates or higher RPMs coming out of the targeting effectiveness.
You definitely went to a smarter middle school than I did, but that was helpful. Thank you.
Well, then let's talk for Rob about how it's working. I mean, I think there's still sort of more magic behind the curtain there, but talk to us about what are we seeing in comparison to what we saw prior, either with third-party targeting or any other methods?
Well, what we've seen is that this approach definitely has beaten out all of our third-party campaign lines, and that's enabled our clients to hit their goals and to scale faster. We've been now pairing that with the pure first-party data lines, and we've seen our effectiveness across virtually every client and account to move to a much better place.
Dan, one question I had for you. You're so smart, and I'm curious, how do you even come up with something like smart targeting? Like, my brain just can't figure out, like, how do you even go from like the challenges we had before to, all right, we're going to build this new solution?
Well, it's kind of funny. I'll go back to this failing thing first. Like I said, I am guilty as charged. I was Mr. Hyper-targeting early in the game here, and seeing those results come in as poorly as they did puts you into oh my gosh, this is not let's tweak this model and make it work. We got to burn it down and start from scratch. So what it really caused us to do is to really dig in and to start learning a lot more. And what's been great for me personally working at MA is that we have such a deep experience in direct response, ad tech, and analytics that our teams are able to really dig in and understand and work with pretty ominous data sets and then produce some very sophisticated outcomes coming out of it. So we started to do more dreaming around what would be some of the best, scenarios of how can we learn and allow our targeting techniques to be trained by the smarter or smartest opportunities we have available to us. So we went through a fair amount of work to figure out how we could even get the data formatted and structured and cleaned. And so when you're in that phase, you're doing a lot of problem solving. And thankfully, we were able to come up with some opportunities that we could put into market, and we started seeing some success. So it kind of built from that.
Thanks, Dan. Well, I think I'll kind of wrap us up today by saying that the targeting debate is definitely nuanced. Targeting everybody is probably not smart. You need to segment your audience somewhat, no matter who you are. But don't just assume the only way to target is a traditional approach with third-party data. Challenge assumptions, talk to some smarties like Dan. There are probably more options that you're not considering. So, final question. I wanted to wrap this up in kind of a fun way because this conversation can be a big one for marketers. I think it's safe to say that we'd all here today on this call be willing to defend our targeting belief system, even if it's considered a bit of a hot take in the industry. So my closing question for all of us is, what's a normal life hot take you'd be willing to fight for? So Dan, go ahead and get us started.
Well, you said normal life. So for me, normal life begins with this fact that I've been blessed with a wife, 2 daughters, and 4 sisters. So mine actually is a bit more of a hope than anything else, but it's that white and baggy jeans will die a quicker death than mom jeans.
I love the jeans are so comfortable, Dan. How dare you come for the big jeans?
I'm on the other side of that equation, Elena.
Too funny. I'm going summer themed because we're finally in Minnesota starting to get into some summer temps. So I'm going to go a hot dog or a brat without sauerkraut should only be eaten by toddlers.
Ooh, I'll go with you on that one.
Oh, okay.
I do not agree with that.
All right. See, thank goodness. Otherwise, I'd have to say it. I didn't actually bring a hot take.
All right, I'll go. I think diet soda gets a bad rap. I think diet Mountain Dew is actually good for you. I think it's due 30 right now, and I'm going to go have myself one. And so diet Mountain Dew is good for you.
We wish you well on your dew journey, Rob. Okay, so mine, I went a little bit too deep on this, I have a feeling. So my idea was the debate, which I do believe, that LeBron James is better than Michael Jordan. Now, this is pretty controversial. I bring it up because my brother talks about it all the time, and I have notes from him on why. Hopefully this won't lose us any subscribers. And I will say, If you have a problem with any of this, you need to reach out to Michael Hingle, and he said he'll debate anybody who is open to debating this. So first of all, let's talk about team records, because basketball, it is a team sport. So one of the best records of any NBA team was the Cavs in 2009. They had a record of 66-16 when LeBron left that team to go to the Heat. And that was the only player in their top starting five that left. The Cavs record went down to 16-66. So they went from the best record to the worst after he left. In 1993, when Jordan was with the Bulls, their record was 55-27. When he left, they were 57-25. So they got even a little bit better without Jordan, but not a huge change. Speaking of team stats, LeBron in the playoffs has a 58% win percentage without an all-star. Michael Jordan only has a 10% win percentage without Scottie Pippen. LeBron has been to 10 NBA finals in 3 different teams. He went to 8 in a row. And only 3 teams have been to 10 NBA finals. Michael Jordan has been to 6, and I believe he won all of those. The Golden State Warriors, they have the best team record of all time, which was 73-9 in a season. LeBron beat them in the NBA Finals in 2016, and they came back 3-1, and they were the first team and the only team to do this and then win Game 7. My last one is beyond basketball. LeBron James is one of the most charitable athletes of all time. He's also the most charitable person in the NBA, so even beyond skill. Not saying Michael Jordan's not a great role model, but I think LeBron James definitely is. So I apologize if we just lost half our listenership with that.
Hey,
but
Elena, can you explain that to me like I'm in middle school?
She has a strategy. This is a known strategy of actually just people at Marketing Architects in general. This is rational drowning. She's brought so much data, we can't even begin to argue with it.
I think the idea is it's kind of like marketers and targeting. People are attached to Michael Jordan. They love him. He's an amazing athlete. You're not saying he's not. Marketers can be attached to older strategies, but if you look at the data, you take away the emotion, the story is pretty clear. But again, if you have any problems with that, don't reach out to me. Reach out to my younger brother. He's ready.
Ready and willing to debate.
That's it for this episode of The Marketing Architects. We'd like to thank Ayana Klafhockey for producing the show and Taylor De Los Reyes for editing. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, and if you find the show valuable, please leave us a rating and review. And if you'd like to hear more from us, subscribe to our weekly email newsletter. It's built for marketers seeking research-first analysis of the latest trends. You can go to marketingarchitects.com/newsletter to subscribe. Now go forth and build great marketing. Sorry, you caught me off guard.
Wasn't ready for you to be done.
I wasn't ready.